Hey everybody, Taylor Haney, single track surgeon, coming at you with another video. And today we're here in Ridgeline Service. As you can tell, Joseph is working feverishly behind me to finish the many bikes that he has waiting over there. And today I'm actually going to show you how I protect my bike from rocks, dings, and nasty stuff like that. So let's get into it. There are many ways that you can protect your bike from wear and tear. You've got custom options where, those companies look at the frame design and will cover every square millimeter of your frame, or almost every square millimeter of your frame. And those can be pricey. Those can be $100, and then depending on if you cover your fork as well, as much as 120, 130 bucks. That's a lot of money. I think it's worth it to protect your frame, but I'm gonna show you how to do it at a fraction of the cost. And it all starts with this. This is 3M safety tape. You can get it on Amazon for about 15 bucks for a small roll that actually will do 2 or 3 bikes. Or you can get the big, huge roll, which is what I've got here. It's the 12-footer, and that's the one we use in the shop here to protect the bikes that roll out of the shop. I think this actually adds more protection than some of those custom wraps because it's actually thicker. It is a little bit heavier, but really, really not very heavy. This whole roll that's gonna do, whoa man, 10 bikes? 10 bikes. It really doesn't weigh that much. And just the durability of it alone, I think, is a reason to pick this over some of those brands. So step one in the process is going to be removing any components that will get in the way of you cleaning the frame. You don't have to take all of them off like this, but of course, getting the rear tire off and possibly getting the derailleur out of the way so that you can thoroughly clean the inside of the chainstays. That's a really important area because you want to get that to stick, because I find this to be the highest wear area on the bike. So you really want to make sure the tape sticks really well there. Of course, the bottom, top tube, everything, get it nice and clean. So now that you've got it all cleaned off and ready for the tape, you want to basically plan out how you're going to cover the frame. I like to do from the top tube all the way across to the seat tube. I find that whole area is a possible damage area, and then I like to do a really long strip all the way across the down tube. So many protective coatings, you'll see we'll just have one here or just have one down near the bottom bracket. So I like to have that whole area covered. And then of course, because this is about 2 inches wide, it actually fits really well around these chainstays and will wrap all the way around. But first, we gotta get it cut to size. So when it comes to sizing the tape for your frame, the biggest thing that you need to keep in mind are the curves of the bike. So most carbon frames, especially because they go flush up to where the headset is, they're actually rounded. So you don't actually want to measure from here to here, you actually have to go further. So my advice is actually to go much longer than you really need and stretch this out. And this is going to be a rough cut. You want to go longer than you normally would use, because you're going to trim this down anyway, and tape's pretty cheap, so don't worry about it. Now we're going to go on the bottom bracket side here, and if your bike curves, you don't have to worry about it because this tape actually molds really, really well. So you just want to basically feel out the curve, and I'm doing an absolutely terrible job here. I'm going to go down here, give myself an extra inch, and we're good to go. So I just wanted to share a couple quick shape tips with you guys when you're cutting these pieces of tape down. So I didn't actually have to go as extreme on fitting it to the headset. I didn't have to trace it because it's just a very, very slight curve, because the way it's going to wrap around the frame, it's going to sit on the top here and just kind of bend over, and it's not that much of a circle there. So I just went a mild curve and checked it on the frame and got it set up. And you always want to do this one first because this curve is going to alter the size and the length of your piece of tape. That's why you want to cut with extra. And then you want to check the end, and what I like to do on the back is actually mold the corners or round them off. That way you don't have any of those sharp right angle edges for them to catch on a piece of clothing or whatever or come up. So if you just round it out, it allows you to actually press this down much easier, and it will fit really well on the bike there. So let's get it on. So now that you got it stuck to the top tube, one thing you may have noticed in that quick sped up clip is that I actually had to trim the end of this. That happens sometimes because when you have the paper backing on the tape, it actually keeps it from stretching, and when you put it on, you actually are going to stretch it a little bit further than where you measured. So you can easily just trim off that excess, and you want to get the front stuck and the back stuck to the frame, and make sure that you've got it nice and tensioned out so that you can push it onto the frame. Now, you've got a couple options here. You could just do it with your fingers, push really hard, and basically your fingers would be raw at the end of this, or you can find some type of applicator tool. Basically anything that's plastic will work really well. Joseph found that a bash guard, an extra bash guard, works really well to push this on. So what you want to do is start from the front, and you want to get the top pushed down first before you put the sides on, because if you basically seal the sides, you may get some bubbles on the angles here, so you just want to push all of the air out of the top first before you start going down the curve. So now as you got the top all nice and sealed, all you got to do is roll that edge. Now you can do that with the bash guard or whatever plastic applicator you're using, but I actually like to use my thumbs on this because I like to do it piece by piece, so I just make sure I'm getting all the air out. Because a lot of times on the curves, that's where you can get those bubbles because you push too far or whatever, and you end up trapping some air in there. So I like to just use my thumb to kind of roll the edges. So I'm going to start on this side. And through this process, you're actually only doing a thumb width at a time. So you're starting out right where the air is, and you're just going to push down one thumb length at a time. So on top of the top tube, the down tube, and the chain stays, there are some other spots that you might want to think about protecting. And one good thing about cutting all those pieces a little bit longer is you're going to have a lot of little scraps. And these little scraps work really well for getting those really hard to reach spaces, like for instance below the bottom bracket. This piece I'm actually going to cut to size. There's a little piece exposed, and for those of you who like to go over rocks and stumps and stuff like that, you know that this area, if you don't have a bash guard, gets destroyed pretty easily. So I'm going to be throwing this on there, cut it to size, stick it on there. Great way to use all those little scraps. So while I was cutting the piece for the seat tube here, I was noticing that you have the port for the seat dropper, because it actually comes out of the down tube here and goes around and goes up through here. So I'm actually gonna have to cut a little notch around it. But first, what I wanna do is get it seated and make sure that the shape is right, and then mark where that is going to be. And you wanna go pretty liberal around it, because this little rubber bumper itself will actually protect from areas getting scuffed there. So you wanna probably leave 2 to 3 millimeters on the edge. Don't try to cut it perfectly to size. You'll save yourself a lot of frustration if you do it that way. So I got a nice notch cut around for the port, and this is not as much about being perfect as it is about being patient. You want to do slow cuts and make sure you keep putting it back on the bike and checking to see how it's going to fit on the frame. Cut more and more and more and slowly cut away until you've got the right shape. And I am happy with this, so I'm gonna throw it on. So moving on to the hardest and the last part of the frame covering, and that is the chain stays. Yeah, these can suck. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it at all. There's a lot of stuff you gotta go around. You've got the ties for the cable routing. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. But as I said, go slow, be patient, and you can actually make it work out pretty easily. The best part of this 2-inch tape is most frames, it's going to fit perfectly around and you're not gonna have any excess. So what that means is as you wrap this around the frame, let me get a little extra, as you wrap this around the frame, it's actually not going to meet. So that means all you have to do is line it up in the middle here and it will wrap perfectly around and leave a little bit of space on the inside. I chose my hardtail specifically because of 2 things. You've got this weird bend here, so you've got that to deal with, so I'll show you how to deal with that. And this actually gets small enough as you get to the axle, the stay gets small enough so that you actually are going to have to trim the tape, because as it goes all the way around, there is a little bit of excess and you don't want to go over, because that overlap is going to allow for water and dirt and nasty stuff to get in. So let's get to work. We'll do the top first because that's the easiest of the 2, and I'll show you how to snip that piece there. So I've got both of the pieces cut for the stay. I'm actually going to go all the way up to the seat tube because you have the wheel spinning around. It's going to throw some chunks here. Checking on the size here, as I mentioned, you have some overlap going on. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take the low side and I'm going to just cut a slant in it. So right here is where it gets smaller and small enough to overlap. So that's about 2 inches. So I'm going to go 2 inches on here and I'm just going to cut a slant ever so slightly like that. And that makes it thin enough that it will not overlap. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I always like to round out those edges just so that they can't get lifted. And there we go. You can't even tell, very subtle, but that will allow it to wrap all the way around the stay and not overlap. So I got the left upper chainstay covered, and one shortcut that you can use is after you have cut the other one to size, you can actually use that old paper piece as a template. So the last piece of the puzzle is going to be cutting these slots for the cable guide. Now, you have to be careful because you don't want to do really jagged cuts in a lot of the places, but I found actually the best way to do this is actually just to take the scissors and to cut about 2 or 3 millimeters outside. You make a cut on that side, and then you make a cut on the other side, and then you take a nice little razor and you want to grab it and pull it away from the frame and just slowly carve across the part that you cut, and that leaves a perfect size opening just for that housing guide. So now that we've got the first 2 pieces, one on each side, it's time to fit the second piece. And this is where you can take some of those scraps and fit them in place. You can see I'm actually gonna have to cut an angle this way and an angle this way to match. So I actually want to orient this on the angle that it bends to, so the angle that it terminates out. And we're just gonna cut that there, fit it into place. And there you have it. The full bike is totally coated, top tube, down tube, back of the seat tube, chain stays, and there are a couple little pieces that I'll do on the inside of the frame here just to make sure that dirt and rocks coming from the tire don't chip up this area of the frame. But it's all done. And the best part is I saved all the backing from the tape, and I can put it in a little bag and save it for later. And if any one of these pieces gets damaged, just go find the piece in here, cut it out, pull it off, replace it, good to go. So I'm gonna hand this over to Joseph here.
I'm gonna wrap my own frame in my spare time.
This is how we spend our time.
No, it's not.
Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna put links down in the description of where to buy this 3M safety tape. Again, it's just basically those strips that people put in the bathtub. And I gotta give a shout out to Mario. Mario down in Honduras. His bike shop was actually the one that I saw do this the first time, and I'm hooked. I love doing this. It's easy, it's cheap, so all you guys can do this at home. You can get intricate with it, you can go more basic, protect the bike, and it really does help the resale value, because when you pull this off, there's no discoloration of the frame. Pull it off, simple green it, and it looks pretty much as good as new. So remember, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. I'm gonna be doing Q&A sessions with this guy back here, talking about wheels, suspension, bike builds, tons of stuff. And because we're not really paid by any bike brands and we're not receiving the stuff for free, we're paying for all the stuff we're testing, we can kind of tell you guys what we really think about the products and help you guys make informed decisions. Until next time, remember to go fast, get drifty.
Have fun.
Later.